Hola friends, welcome to the Medicine, Marriage, and Money YouTube channel, the only channel for physicians who want to achieve marital interdependence and financial freedom together. On this channel, you will learn how to show up as the best version of yourself so that you can love intentionally and build a more financially savvy relationship with your spouse. And I am your host, a physician mom, a doctor's wife, a Gottman leader, a certified life and marriage coach, Dr. Kate Mangona. Welcome. Bienvenidos. As long as you try and put these keys, these tips in play in your relationship, when you can remember, you're winning. You're never losing as long as you just keep growing, contributing, showing up with love. So number one, when you are emotionally flooded, frustrated, resentful, angry in your relationship, the number one thing I want you to do, the first thing I want you to do is recognize that amygdala hijack. When it's on fire, recognize the emotional flooding. 1.5, affect label. Label what feeling you're feeling. This can be hard. You may have to get out your feelings wheel or watch an episode of Inside Out. Number 2, allow that feeling. You can't get to number 2 until you've done 1.5. Allow it. 2.5, shift the focus. And then number 3, come back to that relationship, to that conversation when you are ready to show up without only anger, without only hostility, without only frustration. And that is what emotional flooding is and what to do with it, how to handle it, how to manage that so that it doesn't take over and control your marriage and drive you to divorce. Welcome to another episode of Medicine, Marriage, and Money. Thank you, sweet friends, for joining us. It's a beautiful day in Dallas. We just drove back from Austin yesterday, and we had several long car rides because we also went back and forth between Frisco today for a birthday party. So Austin to back from Austin, Frisco this morning. So lots of long car rides, time to connect, right? Connect with the children, bond with the spouse, all of the above. And sometimes words may be said that aren't appreciated by one or both parties or all parties. And the importance of today's episode is to talk about flooding and what happens what to do when it happens in your relationship, especially in your marriage. It's not uncommon. It actually happens a lot, and we just don't call it flooding. So what is it? It's when our amygdala fires up and won't stop. Like it fires up with the emotion of danger, anger, irritation, frustration, and you cannot stop it. Let me give you a little kid example. So Catalina wanted her iPad last night as we were driving home from Austin. We said no because it was 7:30, it was approaching bedtime. And we knew if we gave her the iPad, she would not fall asleep. We do allow iPads on long car drives. And so we said no. We said we'll give her to her in 30 minutes, hoping that she would fall asleep in those 30 minutes. And she, right, little kid, big emotions. So she was very upset about this. And she was, and finally she blurted out, "Mommy, I'm frustrated." And I was like, wow, Catalina, 4 years, she just turned 4. Maybe she said that once or twice to me, but she was frustrated and she named it. And she stopped the screaming, complaining as much. I said, "Oh gosh, you're frustrated, Kata." And she kind of settled down, and within 5 minutes, she fell asleep. Right as we pulled into Buc-ee's to fill up the car with gas and grab some snacks. The importance here, so I'm just going to say this as an example story. This is what can happen in your own marriage. or as a parent, you get these big emotions and you have no way to release it because we're not usually those people who walk around and just label our emotions. I was impressed when my 4-year-old did it. But I will say, I and my husband don't often stop in the middle of our conversations and say, I am so mad. I am so angry. And maybe we can. Maybe we can do that more often. And that's what I invite you to do today. So emotional flooding, when your amygdala's on fire, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, and that's called the fight, flee, or freeze response. Fight or flight, or freeze. And it's because your primal brain, so like your midbrain, the centers in closer to the middle section of your brain, which we had back in the caveman days, are on fire. And we still have those parts of our brain. But we also, as we've developed over the years and gotten more intelligent, become more intelligent, we have the frontal lobes. Okay, we have the parts of our brain that, and I know many of you guys already know this who are listening. I'm just reviewing what you may have learned in medical school or college or psychology. The frontal part of our brain, which actually manages those emotions. But when you're in that fight, flight, or freeze response, you don't often connect your amygdala and hippocampus with those frontal lobes. They're like turned off. They never reach. It doesn't reach there. You're so emotionally upset and distraught. You can't pause and reach them. So there's 3 things that you're going to need to do in order to manage your emotional flooding in your marriage. You can even do this at work. You can do it with your kids. The first thing you're going to want to do is to actually be aware that it's happening. So you have to recognize it. You're like, okay, Kate, well, that's obvious, but no, it's not, because it's probably happening in your marriage, in your conversations, in your relationship, and you're not really realizing that it is happening. And then you hear some criticism, you hear your spouse being defensive, maybe you hear your spouse being contemptuous, right? Talking down to you. And what your immediate response would be is to just jump back at them and say, well, he said, she said, you said, or you may just criticize them back. Well, so what if I don't fold your laundry correctly? You never even do laundry in the first place. So you jump back, you get defensive, you get a little critical, and we don't even realize that we are emotionally flooded, which is why we're reacting the way we react. So first step is that conscious awareness. So what comes next? Well, I would say about 1.5 is to label your emotion, just like I mentioned Catalina did when she said she was so frustrated, is just to label it. You label it for yourself, really, that's the main thing. You could say it out loud. Now, I recommend you don't say, I'm so frustrated because you didn't give me the iPad, and I'm talking like as if you're an adult talking to your spouse, but just say, I am frustrated. And that's it, right? I need, and here's the kicker, how many minutes do you think you need in order to calm down that amygdala when you're emotionally flooded? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour? None of the above, it's 20 minutes. And the Gottman actually has talked about this in their research, in their Love Lab research, which they conducted for over 4 decades. You need 20 minutes to calm down that amygdala before you can actually think rationally or more logically and reach your frontal lobes. So what do you do in those 20 minutes? Okay, so number 1, awareness. Number 1.5, label the emotion, affect labeling. Number 2, that was 1.5. Number 2 would be shift the focus and allow that feeling. So if you're frustrated, if you're angry, right, recognizing it, allow it, and then shift the focus. So it's kind of like a 2 and a 2.0. I guess 2 would be allow the emotion. Don't try to react from it. Don't try to repress it. Don't try to just avoid it altogether. So you're going to allow yourself to feel that. And as you allow it, you're 2.5, you're going to shift your focus onto something that's different than whatever the topic that was that gets you riled up between you and your spouse. So you're going to shift your focus. And I'm going to give you some examples. Sometimes I shift my focus onto my calendaring. Maybe I need to schedule some appointments. Maybe I need to transfer some dates to my iPhone. Maybe I need to make the nanny schedule for the next week. Calendaring is just one of those things that I can always do. And it gets my mind off of the actual, like, thinking things that aren't helping the situation. Like, oh, I can't believe they just said that. I cannot, but like, what, and like focusing on those words or those thoughts that are unhelpful. So shifting the focus onto something, and this isn't avoiding. So I just want to draw your attention to the fact this is not avoiding the feeling. You can still feel it. However, you're not going to ruminate on it. You're not going to perseverate. You're going to shift into something that's just more helpful for you, which would be calendaring. Maybe you're an organizer. Maybe you could start organizing your drawers, your cabinets, your car. Maybe you just want to go out for a run or turn on a yoga or Pilates video or go take a class. And it might be helpful to end the conversation with your spouse in a way in which is agreeable to both of you. And you may need to discuss this, or you may need to just experience yourself and figure out what works for you and your spouse. It may mean if you're the type of person who would usually get defensive and argue back or get critical back, it may mean that you just take a moment to be silent and reflect. And that kind of calms the situation down. And then you can shift your focus. If you're the person who stonewalls and shuts down, anyway, and that's your mechanism, you may want to actually make your spouse aware, okay, I'm gonna shift my focus a little bit. I am feeling a little frustrated. I'm gonna go wash the car. I'm gonna go help Susie with her homework, or I'm gonna go run some errands. Shifting the focus onto something that actually needs to get done, or you prefer to do, or something else for your health. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to go to the cabinet, grab your package of ice cream and cookies, and sit in front of Netflix and binge watch Netflix. Now that is okay. I don't see anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with eating cookies or ice cream or watching Netflix, because I do all three of those. But being intentional about when you do those, right? Eating because you're actually hungry. Watching TV because you've actually planned it, or you've actually, your day is done, or whenever you decide you're going to actually do that. Because I'm very, very big into time management, scheduling, right? Which is another discussion for another day. But we're shifting your focus into something that you'd rather be doing than ruminating, perseverating, growing your anger. Okay, to move you for 20 minutes, it's got to be 20 minutes, and it cannot be thinking about that topic. It cannot be thinking about unhelpful thoughts. It can't be replaying the story, the narrative that just happened between you and your spouse. Okay, so that is huge. Shifting the focus. Number three is actually very simple. So what is the third step once you recognize you're emotionally flooded? The third step after allowing the feeling, right after recognizing. Number one was recognizing. Number two was allowing, shifting the focus. Number three is going to be coming back only when you're ready. And you may be saying, well, Kate, what if I'm never ready to come back to that conversation? Well, that's okay. It's all an experiment. Maybe that conversation's not meant to be had ever again. Maybe it's not helpful. A lot of times, especially as healthcare workers, as physicians, we want to fix the problems. We've got to address that again, right? We addressed pancreatitis yesterday. We've got to address it today. We've got to address it tomorrow until it's resolved. Maybe that issue you were discussing is not a solvable issue. Maybe it's not something you need to hash out again and again. Maybe you can resolve it in your own head. Or maybe it's a discussion for a different day. Maybe it's a process that you need to just understand each other's point of view, starting with you, understanding your spouse's point of view, not your spouse and understanding your point of view. Because remember, you're here listening to Medicine, Marriage, and Money because you're the one in charge of this conversation right now. So come back to that conversation or come back to that human being, your spouse, only when ready. What if I'm not ready for number 3? Then stay with number 1, right? Stay with number 1, the awareness, okay? Because you can be aware all day long. Then move to number 2, okay? Recognize, allow that feeling, allow it. Number 1.0, actually affect label. Number 2, allow. And there's a whole bunch of discussions that can be had about how you're going to allow. 2.5, shifting the focus. And this, I feel like, is the real key. That's the real gem. That's where the magic happens, is when you learn how to shift your focus onto something that's more helpful and more appropriate. Because we all get trapped in ruminating and thinking and holding on to emotional baggage, holding on to thoughts that are not helpful in our relationship. And eventually that leads to divorce or an unhappy, resentful marriage that could last for 20 or 30 years or forever. Okay. Come back when ready. That may mean come back, put your hand on their shoulder, a peck, a hug. You can still have those feelings and come back with love or with affection or with curiosity, right? We always say if you can't get to love yet, go to curiosity. Get to neutral first. But you can just come back, let them know, hey, we're still in a loving partnership here, and I'm still going to be a little mad. You're a team, right? So if you shift your focus, this is another key thing about 2.5 is when you shift your focus, sometimes what works for me and some of my clients is shifting the focus onto the most recent time you can remember when you guys actually were a team. You weren't fighting. You weren't having this narrative. You weren't emotionally flooded. When was the last time you were actually emotionally overwhelmed and flooded with love and kindness and appreciation? Go back to that time. Go back to that time. And hopefully it wasn't in the too distant past. Hopefully you don't have to go back 7 years or 3 years. Hopefully it could just be a day or 2 or a week or a month. If not, a separate discussion will be had about keeping track of those times that you do have to be grateful and appreciative. So that's where I'm going to end today with those 3 key takeaways for what to do when you're emotionally flooded. I'm going to repeat all 3 steps again. Go back and listen, take notes, experiment. Remember, this is just an experiment every day. As long as you try and put these keys, these tips in play in your relationship, when you can remember, you're winning. You're never losing as long as you just keep growing, contributing, showing up with love. So number 1, when you are emotionally flooded, frustrated, resentful, angry in your relationship, the number 1 thing I want you to do, the first thing I want you to do is recognize that amygdala hijack. When it's on fire, recognize the emotional flooding. 1.5, affect label. Label what feeling you're feeling. This can be hard. You may have to get out your feelings wheel or watch an episode of Inside Out. Number 2, allow that feeling. You can't get to number 2 until you've done 1.5. Allow it. 2.5, shift the focus. And then number 3, come back to that relationship, to that conversation when you are ready to show up without only anger, without only hostility, without only frustration. And that is what emotional flooding is and what to do with it, how to handle it, how to manage that so that it doesn't take over and control your marriage and drive you to divorce. Right? We want to stay in a happy, a joyful, a committed marriage, a place where we feel safe when we come home from work or when we come home from someplace we're not as emotionally safe. We want this to be a place of calm, joy, and peace, not toxic positivity. But if you follow these 3, 1.5, 2.5 steps, then you will get there. Every day you will get closer. Thank you so much. Please, if this was helpful for you, if these 3 tips were helpful, please share with a friend or a family member who may need to hear them. You may recognize sometimes in other people's marriages or relationships that these messages may be helpful. It could save somebody else from emotional exhaustion. Please share. And people hear this people are more likely to see this if you leave an actual review. Subscribe, follow, leave a review, share, and spread these messages. Talk about them with your friends. Message me. Let me know what works and what doesn't work. So much love to you and your spouse. Until next time. If you are finding the concepts I teach in these episodes useful and want more in-depth and personalized support for your relationship, consider this your invitation to join me in creating the most connected and intimate relationship with your spouse that you could dream of. Go to www.medicinemarriageandmoney.com right now and download my 18-page medical marriage survival guide and workbook at no cost to you. I also have a 6-day marriage challenge, which goes over the 6 predictors of divorce at no cost to you. These have been known to decrease fighting, rumination, and grudges between you and your loved one. If you want to take it a step farther, really enhance the joy and connection in the most intimate relationship in your life, sign up for my 8-week Making Marriage Work program today at medicinemarriageandmoney.com. Thanks for leaving us a stellar review, subscribing, and sharing with your friends on social media. You have the power to improve someone else's life and marriage simply by sharing this episode. Much love to you and your spouse. You're exactly where you need to be in this moment. Adios, my friends. The content of this episode is not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or financial advice. The opinions provided on this episode are those of myself or the invited guest alone. They do not represent the opinions of any particular institution. Always seek the advice of your physician or financial advisor with any questions you may have of a medical condition or financial plan. This is for your entertainment only.